Hi everyone. Today I'm back after the miniature break I took to focus on Camp NaNoWriMo for the month of July, and so I decided to come back with another bookshelf tour in my bookshelf tour video series. This is going to focus on the books on this shelf. Obviously the rabbits are blocking the way if you missed either of my what's cheering me up right now videos. These are some of my many plushy dreadfuls which I currently own. Obviously you can review those videos if you're more interested in the rabbits, because obviously the books are the main focus of this video, not the rabbits. But I am planning to do in future a video introducing all of my plushy dreadful bunnies in my little cute little warren. So anyway, I'm taking the books down. Oh, you can obviously and I'll obviously be doing a close-up first, and you can obviously I'll be pulling them down individually and showing them and briefly talking about them. So you can see right now this is the shelf in question. This is, I believe, the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth shelf up of currently total 6. Unfortunately I haven't read a lot of these books, but I obviously do plan to read them all at some point. I've read others, and obviously there's lots of Charles Dickens. It's shocking to admit I've never read any of him, but obviously when I pull them all down, you can see them a little bit, talk about them. And I have talked a little bit about a few of the books on this shelf in a past, what's on my bookshelf video, because I was talking about books that came out of a crate, not the one of the crates that was in storage. This crate never went into storage, and you can obviously review that video if you're interested. But again, I will be briefly talking about those books because it overlaps with the crate video plus this video. So I have now taken down all the books off of the shelves, and I forgot to mention I'm wearing my new anxiety bunny wristbands, also from Plushy Dreadfuls. You'll see that unboxing in my upcoming third What's Cheering Me Up Right Now video. And so let's start with this one. This is Don Quixote, obviously a classic of both world and Spanish literature. I read some of it in the original Spanish in my senior year of high school. This was the 6th year I had taken Spanish, but the class was called Spanish 5. We had a mix of sophomores, juniors, and seniors. I could tell so many stories about these 3 girls I was sitting near in Spanish class. They were constantly obnoxiously blabbing about their sex lives, and one of the girls had a pregnancy scare. It was just a whole awful mess, really embarrassing for me to listen to these intimate details about their lives. But honestly, I really did like what we read in my junior year Spanish class. We never actually read any literature in Spanish. It was so embarrassing, and particularly because that was the last the 4th of 4 possible years of Spanish for these kids, and they were only just watching freaking English language movies adapting classic Spanish literature. Seriously, there were so many things just so effed up about that so-called Spanish class. I didn't feel like I really learned anything, and I knew more Spanish than these kids who had been were higher ahead of me in high school. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to reading this book all the way through. Hopefully maybe someday we'll go back through and read it all the way in Spanish. Obviously this is an English translation, and they had several different translations at the Mr. K's local used bookstore, but I chose this one because I saw it had that beautiful classic Gustave Doré illustrations. Let's see if I can find any of them. Although obviously the print, you can see it's one of those things I really don't like, because long books don't necessarily need the so-called normal trim sizes. If we're talking about a book that's over 1,000 pages or so, it shouldn't be 5 by 8 or I think, yes, this looks like it's 5 by 8, I would say, or 6. It doesn't really look like 6 by 9. So really you definitely need at least 6 by 9 or 7 by 10 trim size for a book like this. And you can see the words are just so tiny and squeezed together and practically falling into the gutter. That's what we call the inside margins in a book. But I did get it because of the classic Gustave Doré woodcut illustrations. He didn't just illustrate the Divine Comedy. That's what most people probably associate him with, but he illustrated a version of the Bible and a bunch of other classic literature. I'm having a hard time finding the illustrations because of the paper. That's just another one. So I am really looking forward to reading this book at some point. And I got a bunch of Charles Dickens books from Mr. K's as well when I was there one time in the past, but obviously haven't read them yet. Really looking forward to, because I know that's a huge gap in my literary education. This is Little Dorrit. I saw part of a mini series. I think it was on PBS, I guess. I don't remember what year it was from. I think it was fairly recently, within the last 20ish or so years maybe. And it did look really interesting, particularly because I know this story and in many of Mr. Dickens's other stories, he talks about the haves and the have-nots, the struggle of the proletariat and against the capitalists, the bourgeoisie, fat cats and rich people. I'm a socialist, if you didn't know already. I'm the old school socialist, not the new school champagne socialist on TikTok, so I like really do live my political values, and I really do feel like, reading books like this, talking about the honest struggle of the poor and the working class against like people trying to exploit them and keep them down. And I know at one point they do like come into some money and they're trying to join society, but it's like you can't really shed your origins. Obviously, of course, it's nice to have money, but it's like, deep down you were not socialized as a rich person. Like I remember there was one scene in the TV movie, like Dorrit is, or I'm sorry, Amy, I guess her nickname is Dorrit. I obviously haven't read the book or seen all of the TV series. Her father is so annoyed because she's still calling him father, and he thinks that's so low class. He's trying to force her to do the pretentious papa, and they like, I know, like upper class twits like used to call their parents papa and mama. That just sounds so freaking pretentious and annoying. I would not be able to do that either. So that's just like one of many things. I'm sorry if I'm rambling. This video is completely unscripted, and obviously this is another classic David Copperfield. It's a kind of a weird trim size, and you can see it's kind of like hard to open because of so many pages, but it did look in a lot better shape than some of the other books. Yeah, I know, it's really so hard. You kind of have no choice but to break a spine when you're trying to read a book like this. This is why I changed the trim size of some of my own books when I like put them into paperback. When I made them into hardcover, they originally in paperback, I kind of made a mistake, and the inside margin was only like 7.7 inches or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the conversion, but it was supposed to be like 0.8 on the inside, and it was just like, it wasn't too tight, but it was just like a little bit tighter than it should have been, particularly for long books, so I changed it to an inch inside margins. And this is Great Expectations, another book by Mr. Dickens. I have seen at least part of at least one of the various like TV miniseries or movie versions of it, and this one has a much better, layout and like trim size and the margins and stuff. I am still looking forward when I get like the screen software to doing a video about, like how to format your book. This is for both readers and writers, like the best trim size for like the page count and like, what's easiest on your eyes, what's easiest to hold and stuff like that. This book was included in my previous bookshelf tour video about the books that came out of a crate that was in my closet when I came here. This is obviously like short science fiction stories. I don't remember how I got this book because there's no like price sticker on it. I think it might have been one of the ones I got for my father's bookshelf years ago with obviously permission. I've never taken any books off of my parents' shelf without asking them, can I like own these? And they say, oh yeah, I'm not really interested. I haven't read them in years. Like I don't care anymore. Just, have them. I really, really do enjoy science fiction. Isaac Asimov is one of my top 10 favorite writers. I discovered him when I was 11 years old in the 5th grade. I know that's kind of a cliche, like getting interested in like writing or reading sci-fi because of Asimov, but it really is true for many, many people. And I also enjoy Arthur C. Clarke, and obviously I do need to get more familiar with a lot more like sci-fi writers than just like those two, like Robert Heinlein obviously is another one, and Ray Bradbury. I did read Fahrenheit 451 in my 9th grade year of English class. And this is another one from Mr. K's. I got this when I bought my updated translation of the Divine Comedy by the translation by Mark Musa, I'm sorry, I don't know which pronunciation he used in the Longfellow translation. Well, obviously I'm blanking on the version because I have so many with the classic Gustave Doré woodcuts, and I picked this book up along with the ones I got on this trip. I have seen, off the top of my head, I know like the one film version I've seen from 1921 with my sexy Rudy Valentino and Alla Nazimova, like playing the two not title characters, that shit, Nazimova. I'm sorry, I'm so blanking and rambling. This video is totally unscripted. Alla Nazimova played Marguerite, Camille in French, and Rudy Valentino played Armand, her love interest. It's just a tragic tale, and it's been adapted so many times in films over the years. And nothing really compares with reading the book and comparing it with the film, because like films always leave a little bit of something out. I mentioned this one in the crate video as well. I DNF'd this after like 73 pages or so. I really just was not getting into it at all, and it kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth from the very start. He's like, oh, you can't understand this story or these people unless you have 50 pages of backstory telling their entire, biographical profile. Like either you started the book in the wrong place or you just don't know how to incorporate relevant backstory. Just like let's tell the story of this entire family first before we actually get into the meat of the story. And I'm told the actual inciting incident still doesn't happen until like 400 pages in or something like that. And it's really a shame because I had specifically asked my surviving uncle for this particular translation by David Macduff many years ago, and he got it when I was like maybe 23, 24, something like that. And I do feel maybe if I had read it like 20 years ago, when I first got it, I might have like warmed to it much better than I do now. But maybe I just need to read some different Dostoevsky books first, and then I can get more of a feel for this like huge like tome, like, or maybe it's just not the book for me anyway, even if I do read some of his other books. And this is one which I got on a holiday or birthday gift certificate to Barnes and Noble, and this was a fairly like low gift certificate. It wasn't like $50 or something, so obviously this book is only $7.98, and it's a really good reference guide, particularly because I write historical fiction and it's about all sorts of like world history, and I obviously love these books that are put together by I'm sorry if I don't know that off the top of my head. It's just like the reference guide company, and it has all these like beautiful pictures, and I absolutely love history, and world history is so much more than just the Western world. Like for example, I opened right to this page on India. That's one of my great loves, Indian mytho history. Just so many things about India. This is the Vikings, and here's the U.S. Civil War. That's also been one of my great interests since I was like about 8 years old, I guess, and just so many really. Oh, here's the Meiji Restoration. I absolutely love Japanese history and culture and language and history and just so much things like that. And here's like World War I. So this is just a really good reference guide if you can't afford or don't have space to get like individual like reference volumes, particularly because they're like so heavy and chunky many times about like just the specific areas of history you're writing about or interested in, so you can just get one concise volume like this. But obviously if you are writing or reading a lot or just interested or doing research or whatever about like particular aspects of history, of course it does pay to get the individual volumes. Like for example, I have like World War II and the Holocaust day by day books, as well as like the War in the Pacific and War in Europe and the Third Reich day by day, things like that. And obviously these are two different versions of one of my favoriteest books. This is I believe, yeah, I have this translation already by Mark Musa and Peter Bondinella. I always forget like which his name is. I thought I had put it in a special crate of books and some other like mementos that were going to come with me when I was moved here 6 years ago, but unfortunately it appears that crate of books also ended up in storage 900 miles away, so I had to buy the translation all over again. My translation has a much different cover. This is unfortunately illustrating one of my least favorite stories in the book, when this dude throws his weight around and uses like a ghostly vision to like psychologically coerce this young woman he's like unmutually in love with to marry him. That's just, I hated that story so much. I do not see that as a love story that starts sadly but ends happily. It was just some dude exhibiting coercive control to get some woman who didn't like him to marry him. And this is obviously a much larger trim size of the book. It's a different translation as well. It doesn't get quite all the like the earthy language and the dirty jokes and just like the fun dirty puns and all that stuff. But it's just good to have different translations of a favorite book that you love. And by the way, I am still really looking forward to eventually doing my series of videos on the Decameron. It'll probably be at least like 110, 115 videos. So if I ever do get enough, like active engagement on my channel, I'm really looking forward to finally starting that. So if you're really interested in seeing that at some point, like in the future ever, just let me know or like help to put the word out. I got this from the $5 classics bargain shelf at Barnes and Noble. I don't remember if it was the same time I got that world history book. I was kind of embarrassed when looking back over my videos of my bookshelves back home in Albany. I actually already have a copy of Tom Sawyer, but it's a paperback, and it's also a mass market paperback size, which I think is like 4x7. I will be mentioning this in much more detail in my future video about trim sizes and margin formatting and stuff like that. But it's good to have a larger trim size for a book, particularly because like this is just like fun, all these cute illustrations. I read Tom Sawyer in the 5th grade in 1991. I believe I was in 5th grade from 1990 to 1991, but I think I probably read it in the 1991 part of my 5th grade year, and I absolutely loved it. Like Mark Twain is one of my favoriteest writers. He's in my top 10 of favorite writers. I've always had like a troubled, like really difficult time getting into a lot of 19th century English language literature because it's just, like so flowery, like get to the point, like ma'am or Mister, don't just like describe a flower or a drawing room or something for like 3 paragraphs. Just like tell me the actual plot of your story or do some character development. Don't just like describe everything in this like flowery poetic prose. But like, Mark Twain, he gets right to the point and he writes about real children too. Like this was also until Harriet the Spy, and I think like 1965, and there just wasn't many like examples of children's books of children acting like children. Another one was Booth Tarkington's Penrod, but it's just a boys book, stereotypical boys book. But obviously, I've always been very tomboyish, so I really geared up to it too. It's just I hate these like really really old children's book when like kids are like just unrealistically annoying goody goodies and they're too moral for their own good, like little Eva and Uncle Tom's Cabin. Oh, I'm so happy I'm sick and I can't wait to die because I can go to heaven. Unlike these kids who just don't give a toss about like bad behavior and stuff like that. They're acting like normal kids instead of like an overly moral Puritan adult preacher's idea of what like a child is supposed to look like. And this one I've read twice. The first time I read it was in November of 1999. I believe I looked through it again a year later when I was doing a research paper for my junior year English class. It's a long story. I was shoved into an English class with students who had never written a research paper before. Instead of like them realizing, oh, I was a year ahead in English, so why don't we put me in with the senior class actually studying Shakespeare and stuff. I had to write like freaking research papers like with kids who had no idea how to write one at the age of like 16, 17. But anyway, I looked through it again because I was writing a research paper. I was an Anastasian for almost 20 years. I know that's kind of really embarrassing to admit to, but I was totally fooled in this book by Peter Kurth, Anastasia, The Riddle of Anna Anderson. It really had me fooled, and like a lot of people at the time didn't really know this like information. A lot of like things like rebutting her claim and exposing her as the fraud she was. It was just locked in archives, or people didn't know it was a game of telephone. I'm still planning to do a video comparing and contrasting this with the Wilson and King. I'm sorry, I always forget like who has which first name. I'm Greg King and Penny Wilson, I believe, or maybe it's the other way around. Obviously, I'll do that when I do the video, like the resurrection of the Romanovs. It like totally puts this fraud's claim to rest. Like I was like totally blown away. All this information, a lot of it had never been like publicly available for, and this is like beyond DNA. Although obviously there were lots of DNA tests. This was like documentary from like so many different countries and vaults and stuff, and a lot of this information actually was out there, but it was just like covered up or not reported or like severely decontextualized. So like seriously, this book may be an Anastasian writing or reading the Wilson and King book, Resurrection of the Romanovs. It completely shattered my last like remaining increment of like maybe it was like belief in this fraud's claim. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to doing that video at some point. And I also got this from Mr. K's bookshelf. Obviously, it's a tiny, like, unusual trim size. This is the Bhagavad Gita. I believe I have another translation of the Bhagavad Gita in storage, of course. It's not, like, richly illustrated like this. The main reason I got this one is because of the illustrations. Again, I love Indian culture and art and stuff like that. And I also read from the library in 2002, I believe, other different translation of the Bhagavad Gita. And I got interested because I had read Devi Vanamali's The Play of God, which is about the 125-year life of Krishna and a little bit leading up to it, the troubles of his parents being thrown in jail because there's a prophecy their eighth-born son is going to kill the evil king who is the brother of Krishna's mother. And just, and the Bhagavad Gita is part of that story because it's in the Mahabharata, India's national epic, which is 18 times, I believe, longer than both the Iliad and the Odyssey combined. And so the Bhagavad Gita, just like it's the height of this beautiful sermon which Krishna delivers to his best friend Arjuna on the eve of an epic battle between the evil Kaurava cousins and the virtuous five Pandava brothers and their allies. And he's like, Krishna is urging Arjuna, like, take heart, Krishna, fight. This is the moral thing to do. And it's just like an absolutely beautiful sermon. And at the height of the sermon, Krishna reveals himself and all his like glory and majesty and divine presence to his friend. It's just such a beautiful, beautiful sermon and story. This is Blood and Sand, Sangre y Arena by Vicente Blasco Ibanez, who is Spain's great national novelist. I've seen the 1922 original film version of this, starring my love, Rudolph Valentino, probably at least like 20 times by now. It's absolutely one of my favorite silent films. It was the first film of Rudy's which I ever saw. It's just, oh, my heart literally skipped a beat the first time I saw him in motion. I just knew he was going to become my favorite male actor, and he did. He was just such a beautiful man, both inside and out. And this is just an amazing story. It's not only the story of this man like who's like this great bullfighter. It's also an anti-bullfighting novel, which is good because that's just a disgusting sport of like bloodlust and hurting defenseless animals for like entertainment. It's just like really disgusting. And there's like overlapping stories in the book about there's a bandit whose like life story kind of like intersects and mirrors Juan Gallardo, the hero. Obviously he's like creating his fame and glory through a different kind of like murder, but Gallardo's as a toreador, the bullfighter, is more socially acceptable. And there's this weird like philosopher dude who like appears like throughout the story. He kind of really wasn't necessary. He's just like musing on like macabre, like morbid stuff about life, and like collecting skeletons and torture implements from the Middle Ages and stuff like that. And Juan is tempted by this woman, Donna Sol, who's this like blonde temptress. In the book, she's made into a dark-haired woman. In the film, and his sweet wife, Carmen, who can't have children. She feels like very left out, like maybe it's my fault. My husband is leaving me. I have to get him back from this wicked woman of the world. And so it's a bit of a love triangle like that. I also saw the 1941 remake with Tyrone Power, who's one of my absolute favorite male actors in the Sound era. He was so handsome, such an absolutely beautiful man, but it wasn't nearly as good as the original film version. They kind of like left a lot of stuff out, but it was like good in its own right. And like I never pass up an excuse to watch beautiful Tyrone Power in motion. And this I also got from Mr. K's bookstore, Irene Nemirovsky, All Our Worldly Goods. This is, some people might know, she was French Jewish woman. I believe her family was originally from Poland. They immigrated to France to escape the institutionalized systemic anti-Semitism. Obviously, it still existed all across Europe, but it was a bit lessened in France, particularly because French Jews had legal emancipation since 1789, I believe, or since Napoleon's rule. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the exact date. I'm not too up on French history, and sadly, even though she like tried to like convert to Christianity to save herself, she was still deported to Auschwitz. But thankfully, her two young daughters were spared deportation and murder. And Madame Nemirovsky, she was like a great novelist, one of the finest of French, and I'm really looking forward to reading this eventually. Obviously, her best selling, most famous novel, Suite Française. It was unfinished, sadly. She was still working on it when she was deported to Auschwitz, but it is still kind of a bit of a chunker of a book. And the last one on the shelf, this video won't be like super long, is by Walter Dean Myers. I absolutely love him. He's one of my favorite contemporary writers. He did pass away a while ago, maybe 10ish years. This is called Fallen Angels, about serving in Vietnam. On the synopsis is, 17-year-old Richie Perry has just graduated from high school. There's no way he can afford college, and the streets are just too hard. So he signs up for the army and gets shipped off to Vietnam. In a battlefield jungle where every move can mean the difference between life and death, he meets Pee Wee, Lobel, Johnson, and Brunner. They're all here for different reasons, but now they share a single dream: getting out alive. And he wrote like YA in middle grade, but his was like much different than a lot of contemporary stuff. He actually like wrote well. I'm not trying to throw shade on people, but I actually really get into his stories because they're like realistic, and it's not like, oh, and then Johnny looked at me, or this is Johnny looks at me, because like God forbid you don't use first person present tense in a YA or middle grade novel these days. And it's just like, it's also very like gritty urban realism and stuff, not these like bourgeois kids in their little suburban housing developments with no real like major problems or anything like that. No, I should have read the synopsis for this one before I shut off the video. For the All Our Worldly Goods, Pierre and Agnès, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, it's the French form of Agnes, marry for love against the wishes of his parents and his grandfather, the tyrannical family patriarch. Their marriage provokes a family feud which cascades down the generations. This brilliant novel, set in France from 1911 to 1940, is full of drama, heartbreak, and the telling observations that have made Nemirovsky's work so beloved and admired. Thank you very much for watching to the end. Hopefully this video wasn't too rambly and all over the place, but it has been coming up on 3 weeks since I've made a video, so I'm a little bit out of practice. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. And I particularly love seeing comments from you guys. I just want to make more friends on BookTube and AuthorTube and have conversations. So I'm gonna see you guys again very soon. Hopefully it will be like less than 3 weeks apart from the next videos. And bye.